Okay, let's begin. Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. And we are up to today's Blat Daf Lamed, so we will start from the beginning of the Pedic of maybe Kadayayin, the Chok Tesson based on the bottom. We had a similar discussion in Gemara Shabbos. It's an interesting question, and that is, what's worse, or what's considered bigger bother? Carrying heavy barrels, but you only have to make a few trips, or taking on lighter barrels, but making many trips. And we had that discussion in Gemara Shabbos. So the Mishnah says here, remember, we tried to avoid tircha as much as possible on Yom Tov. I may be kadayim. Somebody brings barrels of wine and makkah from one place to another place. Lo yaviyim, you should not bring them besal the kuppah to put a bunch of little barrels inside a big box, because then right now the problem is it looks vachadik. It does not look Yom Tovdik. It looks like you're out, carrying things to sell or whatever, to go to the market. Well, maybe you outcast, but say for you're allowed to carry a barrel on your shoulder because it's not the normal way. 1 or 2 barrels, or the fun of a carry before you. Again, it's not the normal way of carrying. Likewise, if you're going to carry straw, don't put it in the box and put it behind your back, because that is the normal way of carrying straw. And you're carrying it, let's say, to feed your animal or to make a fire. And it's not nice for Yom Tov. It looks like you intend to do some kind of work. You can carry it in your hand. If you want to start a fire, you start out by aromas hateven. You have there a pile of straw, even though you did not set it aside. You can use it to burn for your firewood. In other words, we don't believe in muktzah, even though you did not think about it prior to Yom Tov. This part of the Mishnah says there's no muktzah. But then the Mishnah concludes, behind the front of the house was called a chatzah, courtyard. The back of the house is called a muktzah. Because the people didn't frequent the back of the houses as much as the front of the houses. And there they used to pile up wood. And you usually leave things there that you don't plan to use every single day. So the Gemara says, don't use the wood there because it's muktzah, which is obviously a contradiction. You started telling me I can just use a pile of straw, didn't think about it. And then you tell me, but don't use the pile of wood because you didn't think about it. So which one is it? So first thing, Gemara says, Tana, we learned the principle of our Mishnah is in EF shel l'shabbos mutter. Our Mishnah wants you to change for your normal weekday activity if it's possible. But for example, you invited lots of guests and you have to bring a lot of barrels. You have no bread, so you can carry it in the box. Iskin Rav Mechuzah Rav instituted in his city, which is Mechuzah, the Daru Beduchka, those things that a person carries on his shoulder, and it's a bother if you want to carry it on Yom Tov. Is leader of berigla. You should carry it. Normally carry it on your shoulder. You should carry it now berigla. It's in a way it looks like it's a trolley or something that has a wheel, or other mepharshim say it's like a rake, something which makes it easier to carry, but it's not the normal way of carrying. But the Rambam learns very different pshat. Rigla, he means put it behind your back, but we'll just learn the way Rashi learns. The daughter berigla, if you normally carry it this way, then the daughter, then what you should do is lidra ba'agra. Carry it, maybe 2 people on a pole. Since it's not no way of carrying it, maybe you do that, and that's how you make a change. The daughter ba'agra, if you normally do carry it that way, 2 people on a pole, then lidra ba'achba, then carry the pole, but the pole don't put on your shoulders, put on your hands. That's the shini. The daughter ba'achba, let's say that's a normal way of carrying it. And nifrei subzolai, put a handkerchief on top. Not that it does anything to anything, but it makes it look different. It appears differently. If you have no braid, you can't do any of the above, then shari, it's all permitted. We learned if you cannot change it, for example, you don't have a handkerchief to cover, then you can just carry it because you're allowed to. The son of Rashi, the Rabbanan said, the Rabbanan said, as much as possible, we should try to change. Let me ask you a question. These women, they go out to the wells and they fill up with water to bring it home. They don't make any changes. You would think the men would go out and do it because it's pretty heavy, but the women used to go out and do it, and they didn't make any shuli. The loy amrin ulhuvla meeting. I didn't see anybody protesting or telling them, hey, you should have made a change, carried bigger, whatever, less times or carry differently. We just said all the different examples that Rava just gave. Amalei, he said, what should we tell these women? Heichi lavi, what should we tell? Let's say the malya bechatzverab. Let's say a woman who knows she's a strong woman, she carries a large bucket and fills it with water. What should we tell her? Tamli bechatzvazutta, why don't you start using smaller barrels, make a change? But we're going to force her to make twice as many trips to the well. You're making her walk a lot more, which is again a bother on Yom Tov. The malya bechatz bezutim. Let's say normally she takes small barrels. So what should we tell her? Tamli bechatz rabba, use large barrels. It's an extra burden, an extra weight, and it's against the spirit of Yom Tov. So we don't have a breda. What else should we tell her? Maybe we should tell her that she should cover the piece of wood to the barrels, something which they don't normally do. Again, we have a problem because in the nuffle, what happens is if it falls down, and you might end up carrying it. Now, not everyone is great as this little piece of air. But what's the problem? We learned before, as a machlekes Rashi and other Rishonim, when we say you're allowed since you're allowed to carry Yom Tov, for example, you're allowed to carry even things which are not necessary. According to Rashi, even they're not necessary at all. According to the other Rishonim, it still has to be necessary for Yom Tov. So over here, if this piece of wood falls down, she might end up carrying a shusarabim. So according to the other Rishonim, she is doing an avera because it's not really necessary for the benefit of Yom Tov, and you just put a piece of wood to make a shinny. So you don't gain anything directly from it. You'll carry the wood on its own. Shusarabim, you'll be even isa daraisa. The heter of carrying does not extend to something which doesn't directly benefit Yom Tov. According to Rashi, it doesn't matter whether it benefits Yom Tov or not, and therefore Rashi deletes this line from the Gemara. Then Gemara continues. What about tik today? Why don't we just tie a piece of wood down or something and make it look a little bit different? But again, we have a problem. What's the problem? The problem is zimnin the mafsik. What if the rope rips? And you'll tie it, and that make a permanent knot. Tifrei sudra alai. You just put a handkerchief over it on the bucket. Zimnin the matrmai. It might fall into the water when a white handkerchief falls in the water, and then you might wring it out. It becomes libun. You are washing, you are laundering. You are squeezing. If we have no choice. And so buy wine. Okay, what do you call it? So Taisa has a question. How come before we said put a handkerchief over it to make a shinui, the handkerchief falls inside? You have a problem of libun. So Taisa answers, before we're talking about the bucket was completely covered. So you put a handkerchief on top just to as a decoration, and so that people see it's different than normal weekday activity. And also over here, we're talking about water. Water is a problem of squeezing is laundering. There by wine, let's say we're talking about wine, and there the problem of squeezing is not laundering because it's dirty. There the problem of squeezing is mefarik. You are separating. So therefore, because you're carrying it over the dirt, if anything wine that falls down, there's no benefit. You have no benefit of the wine. So therefore, it's not a problem of a fire. No, over here we're worried about the handkerchief itself, and you're laundering it. Over there, by wine, when you wring it out of wine, you're not cleaning the handkerchief. The problem there is you're separating and you're taking the wine out. But if I have no use for the wine, it falls on the floor, there's no problem. It says about it further. Tanan, we learned ein mitapchin. Rashi in different places has different types of what ein mitapchin means. But over here it means talking about regarding singing, and Rashi says also avelis, but unfortunately we have a hard time understanding because you don't do anything for avelis on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And yeah, mitapchin means, according to Rashi here, means clapping your hands. So you're not mitapchin, you don't clap your hands. The ein misapkin, you don't bang your hand, you sort of smack your hands on your legs, with a rhythm or something. And the ein meraktin, nor do you dance. You now do any of these things on Yom Tov. And the reason why you now do any of these things on Yom Tov is because we're scared you're going to fix up musical instruments. You're going to fix musical instruments, and therefore, as an extension of that gzera, you're not allowed to play musical instruments, nor you're allowed to clap or anything else. Says the Gemara today, the Chazin, the Avnach, we see plenty of people clapping on Shabbos and Yom Tov and dancing. Well, let me don't tell me anything. Amalei, he said back to us, Hamet, ask a question. Rava, you tell me that every time you see somebody doing something wrong, we have to criticize. Let me ask a question. Rava said, the lechia, a person should not sit at the opening on Shabbos of his mobi, and there's a post there, lechi, because if you sit there, you might forget yourself that you have a lechi there. You might carry things from inside this street onto the main street, onto the Shusarabim. But you might pull an object, also, so you carry it. Yet these women, the shokli chetzavah, you take the barrels, and they sit there by the entrance of Mobi. We don't tell them anything. Ella, but hanach lehem liyisrael, let the Eden be, and mutushi shegim is an important rule. Sometimes, if you know they're not going to listen to you anyway, better don't say anything. Let them be over inadvertently rather than they're over deliberately. Over here, they're going to clap anyway, dance anyway, so don't say anything. Now the Gemara concludes, when do we say that we don't reprimand somebody if they're not going to listen to us? Only by Isur and the Rabbanon. When it comes to the Isur and the Torah, you definitely have to reprimand them, even if they don't listen to you. And even though previously it was a shegi, now it's a major, it doesn't matter. Not true. Loishna makes no difference. It's from the Torah. Loishna b'derabbanan loy amrinen luhu v'lam say nothing. I proved you. The Tosef is Yom Kippur, adding to Yom Kippur the Raisa. We learn the pasuk. It says that the ninth day. The ninth day you should fast, and we ask fast the ninth, but fast the 10th day. So why does it say the ninth day? Because you have to add Yom Kippur. It's mahatoide v'ochli v'shasu ad shechashechan. Yet the women are eating mamish to the last minute, and they don't add anything. We don't tell them anything. So even though that it's an Eastern the Torah, but even not saying the Torah, you have to add Tosefus. Nevertheless, we say nothing to them. In halacha lepoil, the din is that if you know for sure they're not going to listen to you, you don't say anything if it's the Rabbanon, or if it's Mahatoida, depends. If it's clearly written in the Torah, something that's Dukin themselves agree to, then you have to reprimand them at least once. But if it's not something before in the Torah, it's halacha Moshe Sinai, we learn it from a pasuk, even though it's Mahatoida, and you know for sure they won't listen to you anyway, then you don't have to say anything.
What about something which is only like a geder, a siag? Like this very example of you're not allowed to clap your hands because maybe you'll be masak and keli, you'll fix your instrument. So if you see someone clapping your hands, do you have to say anything to them? I mean,
exactly.
It's only
exactly
a
the Gemara just said. It's exactly the Gemara just said. That's the reason why we don't tell anybody, people who clap or dances, if we know they won't listen to us. But if we know that they would listen, if they knew the halach is they shouldn't, then you should tell them. Now, talking about clapping your hand, so in Shulchan Aruch, let's do tases here. Let's do little tases. Tanan, 3 tases in the bottom. Tanan, we learned ein metapchin the ein meraktin. Very important tases. Pidish Rashi says, what's the problem? Shemi yisakin klei shir, because you might repair your musical instrument. It says tases. Miyulidi done, an hour to us. Shadi, we permitted. The daf could be mehen in those days. Shadi be key in lasik klei shir. Everybody seems to know how to make musical instruments. Shaykh makes it before we make that decree. For us, ain't on the bikini in lasik klei shir. We're not experts to make musical instruments, and therefore we don't make exera. So the Tosha clearly says that today you're allowed to clap and dance and everything else. So in Shulchan Aruch it says the following: Yosef Kara says clearly you're not allowed to clap your hands, you're not allowed to dance on Shabbos and Yom Tov. No, and ifs and buts. And the Ramah says he agrees, and then he says yes, I mean that today there's no problem. The Ramah says first he says even so. But if you see someone doing it, don't stop them because mutivi shegin v'aliyim mazidim, like our Gemara says. And then he says, but yes, I mean, but today there's no problem. And the Minchas also writes a number of truths where he says that today you're allowed to. Shulchan said you're allowed to, by the way, clap for and dance only for Simchas Torah, because the mitzvah. The Minchas also says that today you're allowed to clap. The halach is you're allowed to clap and dance on Yom Tovim and on Shabbos, if you're dancing, a Shabbos song or something, something to do with the mitzvah or the covenant of Shabbos, you're 100% allowed to. He says, what we today, we still do not play musical instruments because we might repair them. That part of the Gezerah remains. This is like an extension of that. This is much further away. Dancing from dancing to lead to repairing musical instruments is a bit of a stretch or a bit of a chumrah that today we don't have. in Simon Shin Lamates and the Magen Avram, he talks about how important that in those days they used to make weddings. They used to make weddings on Friday afternoons into the Friday night. And the Magen Avram says, very interesting Magen Avram, he said the most important part of the wedding is not the catering or the hall or the color scheme or the centerpiece. He said the most important part of the wedding is the music. And because so he said you're allowed to hire a Goyish band to play music by a wedding on Friday night. Because since today, anyway, we don't prepare, nobody prepares today anyway, anything. So the whole Easter is a very tenuous Easter. So if it's a guy doing it, a Shem Mitzvah, he says you're allowed to. Pretty extraordinary thing. Okay, let's continue. You start taking the straw from the pile of straw, which you had no idea you were going to plan to use. From here we learn out you're allowed to go out there to your warehouse, even though you had set it aside for future, whatever it is, you had no intention of using this particular Yom Tov. It's like a long term, like an oitze, you're allowed to use that on Yom Tov. Mani, who says you can? You didn't anticipate it, you didn't have anything thought about it. That follows up Shimon, the less than Muktzah. Shimon doesn't believe in Muktzah. No aim must say the end. But then it says in the Mishnah, don't use the pile of wood that you have set aside because you didn't think about it. So that's Muktzah. Also Rabbi Yehuda. The Islam Muktzah. He doesn't believe in Muktzah. What's going on here? Says Gemara, that pile of wood we're talking about is a pile of wood that even Rabbi Shimon would agree that, because there are certain muktzah that Shimon agrees, and one of them is a muktzah machmas chsar and kiss. If it's a muktzah because it's so expensive and will cause a big financial loss, you definitely removed it from your mind to use for any other purpose. So he said, what kind of wood we're talking about here? But we're talking about different kinds of cedar trees. And because you're talking about different kinds of cedar trees, interesting, Rashi said there's a male cedar tree and there's a female cedar tree. I'm not sure I know the difference between a male tree or a female tree. Rashi says that Ashukhi is Erez Nekeva, a female cedar tree. Everybody knows the difference between a male tree or a female tree?
Yeah, some species are much easier to tell than others because some have, like ferns, for example, you can see they have a little buds on the back of the leaves, the male ones. All trees have either males or females. That's why they have to be pollinated. You need bees to come and carry the pollen from one to the other. But some of them are easier to tell than others.
Ah, interesting. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so we're talking about these kind of cedar trees, the muktzah machmas von kis. This is a different kind of muktzah altogether because of financial loss. And I feel that Rab Shimon also would agree that this is muktzah. So now Mishnah is perfectly consistent with Rab Shimon. Teven you can use, but not the eisen shemuktzah, the wood that you piled, the logs you piled up, because you can use it for other things. Others, however, others learn on the end of the Mishnah. The comment was, but it says in the Mishnah, don't use the wood in the pile that you didn't anticipate. You're not allowed to go to the warehouse if you didn't think about it prior to Yom. In other words, we believe in Muktzah. Mani, Rabbi Yehudi, this is Rabbi Yehuda, the Islam Muktzah. And yet, look in the beginning of Mishnah, you're allowed to go and use straw. If it's Rabbi Yehuda, how can you use straw? Also, Rabbi Shimon, the less than Muktzah. More says no. In this case, Rabbi Yehuda, we made you allowed to go to the straw. We're talking about straw that's such a foul smell, whatever, that it's rotten that you wouldn't use it for anything else. So therefore, it has no other purpose. So there's no Muktzah. You have no intention to use it for anything else. So that therefore it is rotten and it's foul. You can't feed it to your animal, and therefore, what are you going to use it for? For firewood. So that's exactly what you're using it for. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? It has other purposes as well. You can use it for cement to make bricks. The Izbek kaitzim, that thorns there as well. And when you make cement, you have to knead it with your hand for the hand machines, and you can't do that with thorns in there. Next Mishnah of Lamed on the base on top. We had part of this thing here as well in the Gemara Shabbos, and then the sugi of Chanukah, and also in other parts of Shabbos as well. Ein noitlim eitzim min sukkah. You're not allowed to take wood from a sukkah. Now, sukkah here is not referring necessarily to sukkahs, from any kind of a hut that you have throughout the year, and any Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuos, whatever it is. You're not allowed to, if you have a hut, Pesach and Shavuos, you're not allowed to remove any of the pieces of wood from there. Element of some, only what's next to the sukkah, to this booth, but not the sukkah itself. Now, what exactly does it mean? So right now the Gemara thinks it's talking about, let's say it's very thick walls, a very thick roof. So it's not the first layer that you can see that from the bottom, from standing inside. It's talking about the layers on top. Those you can use. Those are samuchla. So the Gemara, why do you tell me sukkah you can? Because the reason why you cannot take parts of the sukkah on Yom Tov is because you're dismantling a sukkah, you're destroying, but obviously you're not allowed to do that. No, so even if it's close to it, aren't you also? Who cares if it's 2 or 3 layers above? The fact is you are taking apart part of the ceiling. My summer son, we don't mean next on the schach, on the ceiling. We're talking about the walls, the extra on the wall. So we have there, let's say, reeds or pieces of wood that are just slabs of wood that are leaning against the wall. Since you didn't weave them into the wall, they're not really part of the wall. Removing them is not a problem. When it comes to schach, they never weave it together. Everything on top there forms part of the roof, so you're not allowed to take off any part. Comes to the walls, only the part that was like meshed together, not anything outside of that. I'll go further. Even you want to tell me, I'm not talking about the walls, I'm talking about the schach itself. Or kitanya, you know what we're talking about? We're talking about ba'asuraisa. We're talking about you have bundles of reeds that you place on the schach, and you didn't untie them. Because you didn't untie them, you demonstrate to us you have no intention of leaving it there too long. You just put it there to dry for a while, and you'll plan to take it away afterwards. And therefore, taking away that bundle, samach means that bundle. That's not really part of it. That's what you're allowed to take away. Well, you're not allowed to take wood from sukkah, only from that's next to it. Rav Shimon says, even from the schach itself, you're allowed to remove, as we'll soon see. How can you do that on Yom Tov? Aren't you destroying the Yom Tov? We'll soon see. What's Rav Shimon's view? But Vishavi, they all agree, but sukkahs are chag b'chag. When it comes to Yom Tov of sukkahs itself, they're asura. Even a chalamayit is forbidden, as we learned already, that the wood, we learned naftes over there, sukkah, that the sukkah itself becomes sacred. The sukkah chag Hashem, the sukkah itself becomes holy, and therefore you cannot use any part of the sukkah for yourself. But the im hisne, if you made it conditional before Yom Tov when you erected your sukkah that you want to use it, then hakol lefitnoi. You can make such a condition, and it is effective. Says Gemara. First, let's understand Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says you're allowed to remove parts of the sukkah. How can you? Aren't you dismantling a hut? A sukkah that actually collapsed. It fell down on Yom Tov. So there's no more issue now of steerus oil. We're not talking about breaking the oil on sukkahs. We're talking about it fell down on its own. So the Tana Kama says you cannot use the sukkah because muktzah, right? Because since when twilight came in, the sukkah was standing, and there was an issa of dismantling the sukkah, so that's called muktzah machmas issa. But the part next to the sukkah, there was never a problem of dismantling. It's not called dismantling if it's standing and leaning against the sukkah. It's not part of the sukkah. Therefore, it's not muktzah. And that's why you move that around on Yom Tov proper. And the Rav Shimon, the time made, less than muktzah. But Rav Shimon doesn't believe in muktzah. That's why Rav Shimon says that you're allowed to, even the schach and everything else, once it fell down, there's no muktzah, so you can move it about. You're not dismantling the sukkah because it fell down anyway. And where do we know that Shimon holds muktzah? As Gemara said, the Tanya we learned, Moshe said, Hashem, you have leftover oil in your candle or shabakaider in a plate. Also, you cannot use it since the beginning of Shabbos and Yom Tov. You thought you can use it to burn. And on Shabbos, you thought it was going to be used to burn, so it became muktzah. Now that you have leftover, you cannot use it. Rav Shimon Matir, he said, no such thing as muktzah. Says the Gemara Midomi, how can you compare? How can you compare the leftover oil in a candle which Rav Shimon is mated to a sukkah that fell down? Some over there, the candle inevitably is going to burn out. So you think it'll be some oil left over. I want to use it. So you're anticipating there'll be some oil left over. So it's not muktzah. You have never completely removed it from your mind. In our sukkah, you want the sukkah to stand the entire Yom Tov. So you didn't expect it to fall down middle of Yom Tov. So even Rav Shimon would concede that this is muktzah. Over there, he's sitting and waiting when the candle burn extinguished. So therefore, it's not really muktzah. That's what Shimon said. There's no problem. Over here, Adam Yesh, the person sits and he's waiting. When will the sukkah collapse? So therefore, by a sukkah, there's no what do you call? Sorry, Adam Yeshiv Tzapim is a person. Sorry, it's a question mark. Well, a person sitting there waiting. Oh, when will the sukkah collapse? No, you expect it to last the entire 8 days. So therefore, entire Yom Sukkot. So therefore, it's even if Shimon will be made of muktzah. Omer Nachman says, no. I'll tell you what. If Shimon might agree by sukkah as well, there's no muktzah, and you're allowed to, once it falls down, you're allowed to use it. Why? How do we explain Reb Shimon? Why can you use it? Reb Shimon also agrees it's muktzah. He says, we're talking about a case here where you did anticipate the sukkah to fall down. We're talking about a weak sukkah. You already thought about, oh, it's going to fall down any day now. So that's what Reb Shimon says in this case. There's no muktzah because you expected it to fall. The Shaman will agree. She was sukkah the chag b'chag. She has also. If you made it tonight, everything goes according to the tonight. Says the Gemara, you're telling me that I can make a tonight at the beginning of sukkah, that I want to be able to use the wood of my sukkah, and everything is fine and dandy. But tonight, does a tonight taka help? I know the wood of a sukkah is forbidden the entire 7 days. He could, and tonight it says Chag HaSukkah Shivas Yomim Hashem. That what the entire 7 days it belongs to Hashem. In other words, it's holy. But Tanya Rabbi Yudam said, he also said, Rabbi Yudam said similar to Rabbi Kiva. Menayin, how do you know? Just like a korban chagiga is sacred, is holy. Kach chol shem shemayim al sukkah. So too, a sukkah becomes holy. Talmud says chag sukkah shem Hashem. Ma chag Hashem, af sukkah Hashem. Just like the chag is to the Eibishter, a sukkah also the sukkah itself becomes holy. And you now have any benefit from the sukkah. So you can't make a tanai that that I want to be able to do the sukkah. The sukkah doesn't belong to you; it belongs to Hashem. It's holy. Amar Menashe Bererov say for us on the sukkah dama when it says over here you can make a tanai. He wasn't talking about Yom Tov Sukkos. He was talking about a booth. The rest, Pesach, Shavuos. Then you can make it tanai. There's no sacredness there. There tanai helps. But when we talk about sukkah, Yom Tov Sukkot, you're right. You cannot make it tonight. Yeah, so right. And the only thing by sukkahs is we said we're talking about cases where it fell down, it collapsed. Then we had a machlekes of Shimon said you can use it, and the Tanna Kama he said you cannot use it. So the Tanna Kama said, but if you made it tonight on sukkahs, that if it falls down, I want to be able to use it, so it's no longer muktzah because you thought about it, therefore you're allowed. So we're saying right now, sukkah mitzvah, you're right, it's kodesh, and you cannot make it tonight. That I want to use the sukkah on Yom Tov. Says he sukkah mitzvah, you cannot make it tonight. And we're asking the other way around. The time we learn, let's say you made this chak properly, the itra bikramim, you decided to adorn it with all kinds of nice tapestries, with sardinian and linen that have nice paintings on them and nice colors. With goyzim, you hung up their nuts, shkedim, almonds, farsikim, peaches, and pomegranates in nice glass dishes that are hanging from the ceiling, or parchili avani clusters of grapes, yenish manim, wine and oil, the salsas and flour, vatore, shipolim, and the stalks of stalks. Also, the stopping members say you're not allowed to use this is noya sukkah, it's not a sukkah itself, it's noya sukkah, so you cannot use it as well because it's bottled to the sukkah. But the im his nalein hakol here a tanai helps. Here a tanai helps. So my question is, what are you telling me that tonight does not help on the Yom Tov Sukkah? Right now we understand that no sukkah, it's all one and the same. And you said before that a tonight does not help because the sukkah becomes holy. Here it says clearly you can make it tonight. I want to use almonds on Yom Tov. You could make it tonight. Abaye v'Rava da Amit Abaye. Abaye Rava say you cannot compare the noy sukkah to the sukkah itself, even though the noy sukkah is completely, secondary to the sukkah, it becomes bottled to the sukkah. So he said like this, but what's the tonight? You say, Eini boidel mehem kol bein hashmoshes. The entire bein hashmoshes, I am not going to walk away from this. I want this. So when it comes to the sukkah itself, you can't make it tonight, because whether you like it or not, bein hashmoshes, you cannot use it because you're dismantling your sukkah, you cannot use it. And kedusha is chal because maybe it's Yom Tov. But when it comes to the Noye Sukkah, when you make that Tanai, what you're really saying is, I don't want the Noye Sukkah to be bottled to the Sukkah. Therefore, the Tanai helps. So, on the Noye Sukkah, there's no Kedusha at all. Aval atzis sukkah, but by the sukkah itself, the chol kedusha layu, there is kedusha there. Then it's katzoy l'shiva. And what? And it's muktzah for all 7 days. Says the Gemara. How come we learned in sukkah just recently that if you set aside 7 esrogim, then every esrog is only muktzah for that 1 day and not beyond? And why are they here? You tell me, Ben Hashmoshes, I couldn't dismantle the sukkah because muktzah for 7 days. It should only be muktzah for Yom Tov for 1 day. How do we learn Hifri Shiva? So you set aside 7 esrogim Shiva 7 days. Every day you can fulfill your mitzvah of esig and then you can eat it straight away. But Abasi says no, you cannot eat that day. You have to wait till the following day. And you have to wait. No, according to Rav, as soon as you did the mitzvah, it's over. You can do whatever you want with it. According to Abasi, you got to wait till the following day. So how come? And how come by sukkah? You tell me it goes on for 7 days. Says Gemara, is an obvious difference. Some the mifsical leilis miyamim, since over there every night there's no longer mitzvah lulav and esig, so every day it's a whole new day, a whole new mitzvah called chad v'chad yamim mitzvah ba'bin afshu. Each day only has one mitzvah. Hoch over here the mifsical leilis miyamim. Over here sukkah goes on for 7 days. There's nothing in between. All the days are like one long day. It's like one long day. So the bottom line of sukkah is holy. And Shulchan said when we say a sukkah is holy, it means you're not allowed to take wood of a sukkah and break it off to use to clean your teeth. But to put things on top of the sukkah, like we just learned on the top of the page, if you want to put something on the sukkah to dry or to leave it there, that you can. You're not taking anything away from the sukkah itself. And so the Teresa asks an interesting question. Here it seems that the problem with the wood of a sukkah is that it's muktzah, because between Ben Hashmoshes you can't do anything with it, it's muktzah. So, and yet, but other places it seems that the sukkah itself is a holy item. We just said on top of the page. That means asam haTorah. It's not just muktzah d'Rabbanan. So we have a number of answers, but in halach, in nafmin halach, Rabbeinu Tam says that the shear of a sukkah, the minimum shear, 7 by 7. 7, the dimensions of 7 tvachim wide, 7 tvachim deep. That shear is mahaTorah. You don't have any benefit. Anything beyond that is only muktzah midrabanan. The Re says as long as the sukkah is upstanding, that is kodesh, that is holy. You cannot have any benefit. But the moment it collapses, then the problem is only muktzah, nothing else. Okay, we'll continue in Mitzvah tomorrow morning.